Death Note is a series that has many underrated characters, all of which contributed to the story in a meaningful way. You have Matsuda, who goes from being a clown that is respected by none to gunning down Light. You have Surichio, the literal embodiment of justice, who eventually gave up his life to save the task force. And lastly, you have Giovanni, the one who was able to perfectly replicate Mikumi's handwriting and successfully swap out the real notebook with the fake. But nobody seems to acknowledge the most underrated character within the series, which is none other than Mello. This is mainly due to the anime cutting out the most crucial scenes that give him the most characterization and development. It also cuts out a majority of his feats, which is a shame because Mello is easily one of the best strategists and planners in the verse, especially for his final few feats he pulls off right before his death, which turns the tide of the final showdown between Light and Nier. Just how smart is the old world's runner-up? Well, before I get into the video, make sure to subscribe as I will be tackling new information you may or may not have heard before, and in general, if you like this content, like and share around, and join the Discord, as you'll be able to talk to me there. Alright, so before we start, let's talk about something I'm really excited about. If you're a JoJo's fan, you have probably wondered what it'd be like to build your own team using characters from across the series. Well, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Spirit is officially worldwide, and it lets you build that dream team of yours. You can select characters from part 1 all the way through to part 6 and create your own dream team and take them into cinematic stand battles inspired by the anime. You can strategize and level up your characters, upgrade their skills and equipment, and experiment with different team combinations across multiple game modes. And to celebrate the launch in August, the SSR Jotaro Kujo Special Summon event is now available, alongside a special Stardust Crusaders story event, login rewards, and other limited time launch rewards. The game also features guilds, friends, co-op challenges, and multiplayer interactions, so there's plenty to do that isn't just main battles. So what are you waiting for? Go and play JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Spirit. It's now available on iOS and Android. So go build your own team and join the launch. Don't miss out on those rewards. The link is in the description and pinned comment. Thanks to the team at JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Spirit for reaching out, as I am proud to be sponsored and their support helped this video come out, so please go support them. Like Nier, we know nothing of Mello's past and upbringing. All we know is that his story was similar to the other orphans that Watari picked up. He possessed substantial talent that could be nurtured by Wami's house and was picked up by Watari at an unknown point in time. It's possible that Mello was taken into Wami's before Nier, as he is older than him. This would also explain his disdain for Nier, as Mello would have presumably been at the top of his generation until Nier's arrival. But what does Mello's name, Mahal Kill, actually mean? Surely it must represent something major, as Nier's real name is symbolic, represents Nier's natural flowing talent from his predecessor L. As for Mello, it has no meaning, at least officially. The name Mahal is a variation of Michael, or Michael, in some countries. Michael is the name of the archangel, and it translates to who is like God, with the implied answer being no one. Throughout Death Note, Light develops a god complex and crowns himself as god of the new world. It is his desire to be acknowledged, feared, and respected as Kira. To him, he is God, and nobody has the right to question that. However, Mello's name, Mihail, is a direct challenge to how Light views himself. If Light says that he is God, Mello's name is more like, really, who could ever be God? And as I just stated, the answer is no one. It'd also be interesting to note if the Archangel Michael thing is true, then that means that Archangel Michael managed to defeat Lucifer when he tried to conquer heaven. Lucifer, who had fallen to his own hubris and ego, would be interesting if this related to Light Yagami in some way. But that's just a theory. A game theory. In summary, there is no official meaning of Mello's name, but it's possible that Mello's name is meant to be a direct challenge to Light's ego and existence. As for his surname, Kill, it could be a play on the words kill, but there really isn't much to go on. So sorry if that's all too much of a stretch, but I'm just trying to get something here. Nier and Mello would continue to compete against one another, until that day on December 5th, in which they would be told of L's death. Roger would attempt to get Nier and Mello to team up, but the latter's pride would not go for such a thing. He would relinquish his claim to the title of L and leave Wami's house at just 15 years old, declaring that he'd start his own life for himself. Obviously, this was an emotional and bold decision on Mello's part, but Wami's house was his safety net. The moment he exited, he lost access to L's resources and connections. He essentially had to start from scratch. We don't know everything that Mello was up to during the 5-year time skip, but we do know that during his 3rd or 4th year on his own, he got in contact with the LA Mafia. In order to win their trust, he brings them the head of a rival mafia boss. But this isn't just to say any mafia boss, it's one that avoided Kira. This is an insanely impressive feat on Mello's end because post-time skip Light is the most dangerous version of his character in the series. He took on the title of L, which gave him access to all of his connections. He has a new set of eyes in the form of Misa Amane, and he now has 2 death notes. Despite having the overwhelming advantage, he failed to kill this mafia boss. Mello, with only his intellect and knowledge, was able to find the mafia boss and use him as a way to get in contact with the LA Mafia. He establishes a sort of partnership with its leader, Rod Ross, and acts as a second in command. But in actuality, Mello is running the show. He's able to build up the mafia's influence and establish authority in America, to the point where they become the top gang in just a year and a half. Mello is such an authoritative figure that nobody questions him, and they decide to follow his orders. Mello's first order of business is to get intel on the notebook's location, and he accomplishes this by planting a spy within Nier's SBK. For 7 months, Mello was able to stay on top of Nier's movements and get data directly fed to him, before the game between them even begun. He had technically outsmarted Nier, who was trying to search all around the globe for him, but in actuality the link to his location was right within Nier's team. Mello decides to kidnap the head of Japan's National Police Agency, Kenichi Takemura. He does it with the intention of holding him hostage in order to eventually get the notebook. But his plan seemingly fails after Takemura hangs himself. Mello is hardly fazed by this supposed misstep because he knows that this was Kira's doing, and he's indirectly exposed himself by killing the MPA director. But how is Mello so sure that this was Kira's doing? It's odd. The director was so cooperative before, so why would he decide to just kill himself? It would make more sense if Kira silenced the director in order to avoid the risk of sensitive information being leaked. This means that Kira is either a part of the MPA or has somehow obtained information as only MPA members knew of the Takemura kidnapping. This also clues Mello into another fact. Kira really can't kill people unless he has one's name and face, because if Kira killed the director, why wouldn't he finish the job and take out the other members of the mafia? The director's face was far more public as opposed to the little group of criminals. So there's also that. Last but not least, there are 2 notebooks in their world. This seems a bit more tricky to figure out, but it's not when you remember that Mello is already aware of the first notebook that is in the MPA's possession. But why would the MPA kill one of their own? If there is nothing to hide, they do everything within their power to get him back. Whether or not Kira is operating amongst the MPA or alone, he'd need to take out the notebook, which is practically impossible as it would be heavily guarded. But if there was another notebook, it would make everything much simpler. With all this info in mind, Mello starts his next plan. He decides to kidnap Sayu Yagami, and no, this is not for the sake of the plot, because Takemura told him that Chief Detective Yagami would have the most influence over the team. Therefore, it's much wiser to target a member of his family. It's simply just a case of bad luck for Light that Sayu was a target, because this leads him to have to make a tough decision. He can either kill Sayu and keep the notebook, or try to save Sayu, but it will inevitably lead to him having to relinquish the notebook. The choice should be easy for a mass murderer like Light, but he still deeply cares about Sayu. So he decides to cooperate with the LA Mafia, which leads to Soricho traveling to LA with the notebook. Mello finds it odd that Kira is so obedient, which leads him to surmise that Kira may be connected to Sayu in some way, but he just isn't sure yet. This is where Mello kind of lacks from an intellectual standpoint, as he's an excellent strategist and planner, but he's not cracked at connecting the dots. That is more so Nier's talent, which technically makes him the better detective. This isn't to say that Mello is completely unable to do so, especially when you factor in his final plan, but he doesn't seem to over-obsess on small details like Nier or even L. Either way, the kidnapping is nothing short of a success, and Mello has covered all angles to ensure that the Mafia gets away unscathed. He asks Richo to tell L to stop every media report on the flight, which not only protects the Mafia and gets law enforcement off their backs, but also inadvertently protects Richo as Kira may kill him. This is a big no-no for Mello, as he needs Richo alive for his future plans. Mello is able to flawlessly create a plan that covers each hypothetical scenario, and also gets L to cooperate. The intricacy of this plan shocks Light, and even Nier later admits that there was just nothing that he could do. After the notebook is retrieved, he sends out a helicopter and a missile at the same time, with them going at different directions. Either one of them could have had the notebook, and before Light can make a move, Rod Ross detonates the helicopter just as the missile takes off into the distance. It's far too fast to be tracked by satellite. It is no longer an option to regain the notebook, which leads Mello to hold the power of a god of death. He tests out this power by ordering his henchmen to tie up all loose ends, which includes the death of an unnamed henchman, Pilot, several SBK members, and the rat that fed the Mafia information. Mello doesn't get comfortable, and he continues to work hard. He has his henchmen test out the notebook to better understand its power, but he suddenly meets with the new owner of the notebook he possesses, who is named Sido. The Shinigami isn't a threat, and actually answers some of the questions about the notebook, most notably confirming that the 13-day rule is a fake. Once again, Mello is one step ahead of Nier, and technically L, as he was able to confirm the validity of a rule that proved Kira's innocence. He even then learns about the Shinigami eyes, and once again surmises that Kira almost certainly used them to kill specific victims. He orders one of the Mafia members to gain the Shinigami eyes, which in Mello's eyes will give him equal power to Kira. However, the moment Light locks in, he's able to absolutely crush Mello and conduct a raid on his Mafia base that leads to the death of all his members. Mello is able to escape, but he's left with a scar and zero resources. It also led to the death of Shirucho, which is not good for Mello, as it now means that Light is even more unhinged. In this situation, most people would swallow their pride and just decide to team up with Nier, but Mello is still insistent on pushing forward. He retraces his steps and decides to target a member of the SBK named Haley Linda, in order to gain information on the Kira case. However, Nier expected Mello to visit Linda and even went as far as to say there was a 70% chance that he'd approach her. This eventually leads to Nier and Mello meeting after years, and by now most of you know how it goes. It's intense. And just when it seems like Mello is about to shoot Nier, he calms down and decides to work with him. He ends up giving him some clues regarding the notebook, specifically about the existence of Shinigami, and that one of the rules are fake, before he decides to take his leave. A lot of people chalk this down to Mello acting like himself, but what if I were to tell you that Mello wasn't acting like himself? If anything, he was acting out of character. It's a common misconception to label Mello as an emotional hothead. Like the name Mello suggests, he's actually a calm and capable individual. He only crashes out when his mythos is questioned. The first time we see this is when L dies. Mello at this point dedicated his entire life to becoming L. That was his idol, and aside from Nier, the only other person he truly respected. L has been hyped up to be this invincible, beyond human level intellect being that can solve the unsolvable. The Kira case is unique, but L promises Mello that he'll see it to the end that Kira is given the death penalty. And then, L dies. He's not as invincible as he was portrayed to be. Even worse, he died before picking a successor. In Mello's eyes, this makes everything he did pointless. All the sleepless nights, constant frustration, and working himself to the bone in order to defeat Nier and be seen as a worthy successor is all for naught. You literally see the surprise in Roger's face when Mello freaks out and grabs him upon hearing about L's death. He's not usually like this. He's more so laid back and snarky, but never an emotional wreck. Mello is actually a bit similar to Light in the sense that he believes if he dedicates himself to a single thing, he will inevitably come out on top. It's how Light became the person that he is today. He was a born genius and was able to learn and accomplish anything he puts his mind to. Tennis, hacking, engineering, and even detective work. The same can go for Mello. Assuming my theory of him being a member of Whammies before Nier is true, he would have been the top student. He would be seen as an absolute prodigy, because his excellence has been evident since childhood. Anything he put his mind to, he could accomplish it. Things only changed after Nier joined the orphanage and became an immovable object in Mello's presence. No matter how hard he studied, he could never surpass Nier. But he doesn't give up. He locks in for the next 5 years and becomes a criminal for the sake of defeating Nier and avenging L. He even ones up Nier, but it all comes crumbling down. He has to meet the very person he's been trying to surpass. And what happens? Rather than acknowledge him in any way, Nier simply thanks Mello for his efforts, like he's nothing more than a pawn. He specifically states that Mello's actions have contributed greatly to his investigation, and now he's pretty much figured out who Kira is. Nier doesn't acknowledge him as a rival but as a convenience. Instead of feeling threatened by Mello, Nier finds him helpful in his own plans. Mello spent all his time trying to independently make a name for himself, but the one person he's been trying to distance himself from through this, still sees him as part of his own team. Now, whether or not you think Nier was being genuine, or he specifically said these words to manipulate Mello is up in the air. But you should really just put yourself in Mello's shoes to understand why he tried to kill Nier here. Mello has literally bled for this cause, blew himself up, and even has a scar to remind him of his failure. He survived on his own and did everything, but in his eyes, he's nothing more than an afterthought to Nier's grand plans. Anyone in this instance would not only be humiliated, but incredibly ticked off. To be honest, Mello only loses his cool when Nero L is involved. But other than that, he's as cool as a cucumber. He wasn't fazed by Takemura's death, the murder of the Mafia, or when he realized he needed to blow himself up. When Mello aims his pistol at Nier and gets talked down by Linda, you literally see a panel of him hanging his head. This is an amazing detail because it shows how embarrassed Mello is. He got consumed by his emotions, and almost did something as rash as killing Nier. This is also another misconception. Because Mello has no desire to kill Nier, he wants to prove to him that he is superior and the more worthy successor. Killing Nier means that everything he's done is pointless, which is not his objective. You could also argue that Mello cares for Nier to some degree, seeing as they were raised in both the same institution, almost like brothers. Whether or not you think Mello shares the sentiment is entirely up to you, but either way, Mello does not want to kill Nier, and when he realizes he's getting emotional, he hangs his head in defeat. You'll even notice that he stops being so condescending and actually talks to Nier on an equal level. After Mello departs, he has been remotivated to pursue the Kira case. From here, Nier and Mello begin to go their separate ways. Mello calls up Matt for a favor, and has him help out on the investigation. He covers the tech stuff and occasionally joins Mello in the field. Mello's role kinda lessens at this point in the story, since he's been reduced to somewhat of a minor character, that is clearly doing his own thing, but isn't getting as much focus as he was before. However, this all changes when we get to the last 10 chapters of Death Note. It's been said over and over again, but most of us are familiar with how the series ends. Light seemingly has gained his perfect victory, but an Uno reverse occurs, and it's revealed that Nier was able to anticipate Light's plan, swap the notebooks and save everyone. However, he specifically says that none of this would be possible if not for Mello. But how could a character that seemingly faded into irrelevancy be the sole contributor to Nier's victory? In order to understand Mello's final plan, we need to go back to chapter 98. At this point in the story, Light and Nier have agreed to meet up on January 28th to discuss details related to the Kira case. Unbeknownst to some of the task force members, however, both Light and Nier intend to put an end to the Battle of Pride. Light's goal is to kill everyone related to the Kira case, and Nier's goal is to definitively prove that Light is Kira and have him incarcerated. Linda is still giving Mello information, but it's not explicitly stated as to what information he's gaining. Based on generalization and later context of Mello's plan, this information has to include 1. There is a Kira out there who's doing killings in place of L Kira/Light. We know this to be Mikami aka X-Kira. 2. Kiyomi Takeda is the link of communication between X-Kira and L Kira. And 3. Nier has tampered with X-Kira's notebook and is going to have him write down their names in the Yellow Box warehouse. From there, X-Kira will write down everyone's name except L Kira's. Nier will apprehend X-Kira and show the contents of the notebook to the SBK and Task Force, proving that Light Yagami is indeed Kira. Despite not having all the information, Mello doesn't hesitate to make a move to save Nier's life, who had a plan that was just flat out inferior to Light's. Not because of what it entailed, but the entire premise. Nier wasn't willing to kill Light due to wanting to prove him guilty in front of an audience, in a way that restricts him. However, Light is completely unbounded by such restrictions. He wants to kill Nier and will do whatever it takes, which is what Light's perfect victory plan entails. Essentially, he has Mikami carry around a fake notebook in public and secretly take photos of criminals. He'd send these photos to Takeda, who would do the actual killing. Mikami was able to fool the task force into believing that the notebook he carried around in public was real. He mouthed words in public to further trick them into believing that he was talking to a Shinigami. If Mello didn't intervene, Nier would have went to the Yellow Box warehouse to die. He'd be under the assumption that everyone was safe due to the tampering with the notebook, but he'd soon realize that Mikami had brought the real notebook, which had been kept hidden until now. Mello doesn't have time and needs to draw Mikami away from Light. He teams up with Matt and has him fire a smoke grenade at the crowd, blinding Takeda and her bodyguards. Mello would then appear on a motorcycle with a helmet that conceals his identity, acting as though he were a bodyguard. At the time, Linda was present and recognized Mello, which confuses a lot of people because Mello and Linda weren't working together. At the end of the day though, Linda worked for Nier, so why bother to trust Mello? It isn't explicitly stated, but Mello and Linda conversed before their final meetup, and it's possible that Mello told Linda bits and pieces of his plan. although Linda is just as shocked as Nia when she finds out that Mello died, so it's up in the air. From here, he loses the bodyguards and takes her to a second location. He forces her to strip naked, and does this because he deduced that she had trackers on her clothing, which her bodyguards could use to pinpoint her location. Just as Mello planned, Takada's kidnapping spreads quickly across the news, alerting both Light and Nia. This causes X-Kira to panic, because he's been put into an entirely new situation than what he was informed of by L-Kira. X-Kira can't communicate with L-Kira because he's under surveillance, and decides to break routine to act on his own. He travels to the bank vault, which has the location of the real notebook, and writes Takada's name down. Light, however, does the same thing not so long after Mikami, via a piece of the notebook hidden in his watch. But before Takada's death, she's able to kill Mello with a hidden piece of the notebook in her undergarments. We as the reader believe that Mello has failed, when in actuality he accomplished what he set out to do. Nia's victory is foreshadowed in chapter 100 as he tells Linda, "The problem is solved. Everything will be fine as long as Light Yagami goes through with our meeting as planned." The notebooks are swapped, January 28th arrives, and Nia is able to defeat Light. He doesn't hesitate to give Mello praise, and genuinely looks heartbroken at the realization that Mello is gone for good, as he stammers over his words, and talks lower than usual. Nia acknowledges that even if Mello didn't surpass him in the end, his efforts were what made Nia realize that alone, he could never hope to defeat L. But if he works together with Mello, he actually stands a chance. Mello's final plan is a testament to the type of character that he is. Even if he wasn't the smartest or the most cunning, he was the underdog, the one that never gave up. Despite being the inferior detective, Mello managed to put the pieces together, and by doing so he was able to figure out Nia's OG plan, while simultaneously countering Light's plan. This concludes the video on how smart Mello is. If we were to rank him amongst the other geniuses, he'd be just behind Nia from a narrative standpoint, but there are certain categories that he flat out is better in, like strategy, planning, and especially anticipation. His social and leadership skills are also incredibly underrated, as he has a more hands-on approach when compared to Nia. Give Mello a proper team and resources, and he becomes a threat that is even able to put fear into the god of the new world. Since Mello died in the Kira case, he doesn't have a long enough lifespan to cover more interesting feats that he could have done in alternative media, minus getting given the BB murder case to narrate over in the novel, which was given to him by L, the century's greatest detective, end quote. For more analysis that I don't want to repeat too much, go watch Nia vs Mello, as I do give more insights on their dynamic, and repeating it here would be wrong of me to do, so please check that out. And most annoyingly, Mello is reduced to just a puppet in alternative media, so we can't even get some meta version of Mello that just randomly outscales everyone, or something like that we have for CTWL, for example. But either way, Mello, in a general playing field in the outside world, is a dangerous opponent. You do not want to face him, as he is willing to instantly kidnap your beloved and force you into the light and end up costing you your life. Hence the title, Mafia L. That was a voice crack. Anyways, for more Death Note content, please support this video, as I know people love Mello, but as for other characters, I'm not so sure. So please share around, like the video, and comment down below anything you think I missed, and if it's a good enough comment, I will reply. I also encourage you guys to watch the other Death Note videos I did, as it will give you some more perspectives and, will show you the scaling of the verse even more, which will give credit to Mello being within those tiers. As we have Light, L, and now Misa, hopefully, if the video comes out before this. So thank you all for watching, and make sure to join the Discord. See you later.